and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. The program is coming to you Monday to Friday on CGTN. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or SCO, heads of government meeting will be held later this week in Tajik capital of Dushanbe. The meeting is aimed to carry out the task set by the SCO heads of state meeting, which took place in June, and Chinese Premier Li Keqiang is attending this time. Committed to globalization and diplomatic settlement, the SCO has been described, though, by some media as the anti-West bloc. Is it really?
Chinese Premier Li Keqiang has arrived in Dushanbe to attend the SCO gathering of the Council of Heads of Government. For Premier Li, this is his first official visit to Tajikistan. At the meeting, Premier Li will discuss China's experience in reform and opening up and the benefits of global free trade. Leaders attending the meeting are expected to exchange views on promoting cooperation under the Belt and Road, trade and investment, production capacity, and people-to-people exchanges. Earlier in June, the annual SCO Council of Heads of State Summit was held in Qingdao. The Qingdao SCO Summit mapped out the group's course with the Qingdao Declaration and 23 signed cooperation documents. According to several senior officials, one of the primary tasks for Premier Li this time is to review how these plans have been carried out.
青岛峰会呢，现在宣言里头呢，把这个构建新型国际关系。
The Qingdao Declaration highlights the construction of a new type of international relations and the building of a common community with a shared future for mankind. I believe during the SCO meeting in Tajikistan, leaders will further implement the outcomes of the Qingdao Summit.
Established in 2001, the SCO is a regional political, economic, and military alliance with China, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Russia, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan as its 6 founding states. Over time, the organization has expanded its membership to 8 countries when India and Pakistan joined the SCO as full members in June 2017. It is currently the world's largest regional group in terms of geographical coverage and population, covering 3/5 of the Eurasian continent and nearly half of the human population. Leaders have looked to influential regional organizations like the SCO to be the last bastion of defense against rising unilateralism and protectionism that's bearing down on the world economy.
For more on the SCO meeting, joining us in Beijing, Wang Yiwei, Jean Monnet Chair Professor and Director of the Center for European Studies with Renmin University. In Moscow, we have Mark Sloboda, International Relations and Security Analyst. In New Delhi, India, Madhav Nalapat, UNESCO Peace Chair and Director of the Geopolitics and International Relations with the Manipur University. Gentlemen, welcome to all of you. Let me start by asking you, Mr. Sloboda, this time the SCO meeting obviously is taking place with a tremendous change in the geopolitics. What can these leaders from the SCO countries be able to reach, particularly regarding globalization and global trade?
Yeah, first of all, the SCO is really a new organization with India and Pakistan now full member as well. So that changes the interests and the strategic balance of the SCO right there. And it comes at a time when basically the United States has declared economic war on every country in the world that doesn't toe the line of the Trump administration in renegotiated contracts. It has launched a trade war of tariffs against China, sanctions after rounds of sanctions against Russia, Iran, Venezuela, North Korea, Syria, and it has now threatened sanctions against its neighbors with India, threatening Turkey, threatening EU countries, simply for doing business with countries like Russia and so forth. And just in the last week, India's show of defiance and exerting an independent foreign policy in continuing to purchase oil from Iran and continuing to buy the S-400 Triumph air defense system from Russia, should be met, I think, at this meeting with a cheer of approval from the other members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And they really need to rally around. It is a threat to globalization and the economies of all the SCO members.
Professor Nalapad, of course, the Russia perspective might be a little bit different from the Indian perspective. On the one hand, India and the United States, if our topic is really related to the United States, have been working together on some of the strategic issues, but on the other hand, disagree with one another on trade and some of the other economic issues as well. Professor Nalapad, how do you see what the SCO leaders will be able to achieve this time during the SCO meeting?
Well, the foreign policy of India is one of balance, and balance between China and the United States, balance between Palestine and Israel, balance between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And the good news is that India is quite friendly with all these countries. Now, so far as the independent foreign policy is concerned, I think a country of 1.26 billion people, which is, by purchasing power parity terms, the third biggest economy in the world, I don't think it can be pushed around. And therefore, the signing of the S-400 agreement with Russia. Now, Russia has been an old friend of India for about 70 years, unbroken, if I may say so. The record of Russia as for friendship with India is completely unbroken for about 7 decades. So we're not going to be people that forget the fact that one old friend is worth 2 new friends. And I think that was demonstrated by Prime Minister Modi and President Putin a few days ago. Prime Minister Modi went to Wuhan to talk to President Xi Jinping and to assure him that the Indo-Pacific is an inclusive Indo-Pacific, which will of course include China. So I think India is looking for a balance in policy, and that's exactly why it welcomes participation in the SCO.
All right. Professor Wang, from your perspective, is this ever more divided world, or this is one country or one stream of thought going against most of the countries and developing ideas of most of the countries?
Maybe divided in the U.S. or some domestic, very polarized. I think the polarization is very popular now. Populism rising not just in U.S. but in Brazil, in European countries. So that's the uncertainty. However, the other emerging countries, the BRICS, I think that the relations are quite stable. So in this regard, I think the SCO, on the basis of the good relations between China and Russia, and now I think India also joined, I think they can have some common visions to reform the international system, making it more inclusive, balanced, and sustainable, and more justice.
Professor Nalapad, of course, the debate about WTO reform is pretty much in the headline frequently these days, and yet countries have very different ideas about how WTO should be reformed. Well, at the same time, you do see that the United States, with the Trump administration, aspires to establish their own, with the U.S. as the center, different regional economic and trade mechanisms, even though many of them have not come into being. So, Professor Nalapad, what do you make of what Professor Wang just said about guarding the WTO as a basic trade system and the way forward from India's perspective?
Well, I'd like to point out that so far as President Trump is concerned, he has been fairly positive on India, just as President Obama was in the second term. I mean, Trump has not really created a serious problem so far on the S-400 defense agreement. He's not really created a serious problem on the fact that we are continuing to buy oil from Iran. And if we don't buy oil from Iran, then the oil prices in India are going to go up even more.
Right.
And there's going to be a very heavy political cost for Prime Minister Modi and the BJP. So frankly, no, I mean, we believe that the Americans have a right to set their policy, and we have a right to set ours. And we are much closer, frankly, to welcoming a multilateral world, because it's only in that kind of world that we have more space to operate.
Yeah, but Professor Nalapad, as you may realize, my question more is about on the international stage, it's not just bilateral between India and the United States, or India-China, India-Russia, but rather, internationally speaking, what does India have in mind, for example, when it comes to international trade? For example, when it comes to the reform of the WTO, for example, when it comes to regionalization, and about a step further for SCO, where would that be? Is India having any concrete idea in mind for now?
Well, I'd like to say that India has always been in favor of multiple paths, and the reality is that a single financial system dominated by the US dollar is not in anyone's interest. And now we are seeing a situation by which India is actively going ahead with transactions from other countries. Russia and Iran are examples. Hopefully China will follow, in which we are trading in each other's currencies and in each other's commodities. So India is in favor of multiple supply chains of finance, multiple supply chains for other important economic products. And for that reason, I think this is very much in line with what India has been talking about and, in a sense, acting for a long time.
All right.
I mean, remember, this is one of the first countries that supported the ANC in South Africa and supported the Palestine Liberation Organization in Palestine, while we are, at the same time, a very staunch partner of Israel in the defense relationship.
Okay.
We are a very staunch partner of the United States in the defense relationship.
Right. Let's focus still on trade, Mr. Sloboda, as SCO has already developed into an organization that is not just about a strategic relationship. It's also about economic and trade interactions among its members and its observer countries. What about the trade issue for the leaders to figure out during this meeting? Once again, my question, will they be able to both have the guts, the wisdom, and the coordinated spirit in order to make one extra step to guard what you believe as internationalization of the global trade, and the idea about reform of WTO and some of the other mechanisms? Mr. Sloboda, your thought?
Yeah, well, I think Russia is position right now is it's focused on looking at the SCO as a vehicle for instituting a free trade policy with China in Central Asia. And the SCO is viewed as the middleman. And Russia looks at, first, it wants to strengthen its position from regional integration with internally with the Eurasian Economic Union. That will combine with the Chinese Silk One Belt, One Road. And then from that renewed position of strength, Russia looks that the SCO will be an economic and political vehicle to help, from that position of strength, to help negotiate further deals of global trade and significance, particularly international finance with the Asian Infrastructure Bank with the West. And it is only from this renegotiated position of strength, of integration and strength in Eurasia that you can meet on terms to be able to effectively negotiate with a more integrated economic and financial policy against the West.
Right. Mr. Sloboda seems to already line up some of the components of possible map that Russia is looking at when it comes to global trade and regional trade, and also vehicles with which to work on in order to make it happen. Professor Wang, from China's perspective, to what extent China would like to work with the SCO to make it also a convenient platform for member countries involved to work on international trade issues, to work on some of the common consensus regarding economic and trade development, Belt and Road included?
Actually, China always support Kazakhstan or other members who also highlights the mutual connectivity among the SCO members, the economic cooperation integration. Now, because of the Belt and Road Initiative is a more broader picture, and then SCO definitely maybe play a more important role. Besides the security, but economical as well. I think now India and Pakistan as new members, they're more dynamic, and they're more domestic interconnected economic trade investment, and definitely the help of all the SCO and SCO members. Particularly China, Russia, and India is emerging BRICS countries. They also have the common mission, common ground to make their voice be heard in the new trade and the investment treaty negotiation. Now Trump, they have the new NAFTA and Japan and Europe, and they then want to, I think, to guarantee the G7's power. So it's time for China, Russia, and India as the SCO and the BRICS, and then to push forward the reform on the basis of more the emerging countries' common interests.
Having said that, though, SCO this time is not just about economic and trade issues. It is also about the geopolitics and how countries involved in the SCO will be interacting with one another. Professor Wang, you know better together with the other panelists than I do about the issue of Iran. Of course, recently we have seen over the past few years, the U.S. attitude toward the Iran nuclear deal has changed dramatically, and therefore SCO's interaction with Iran has become such a focus of attention. Professor Wang, what kind of goal is SCO looking at? What kind of role is SCO also looking at when it comes to its ways of interaction with Iran, particularly understanding what has been happening about the Iran nuclear deal?
Firstly, Iran is an observer of the SCO. Even some in Iran want to join maybe in the future. Recently, the Turkey also didn't come back, also the observer, and then something to build special relations with even some of them would like to join. So that means SCO is more attractive. And the second meaning, Iranian nuclear issue is on the base of the United Nations framework, which Europe has played a major role. So Europe very worried about the Trump's kill the deal, renegotiate. It's making more difficult. SCO definitely also will focus on that, because Iran, if sanctions to Iran, definitely make Iran more either to renegotiate a new deal or maybe go to return to the old track. This is also called troubles, not only in Iran, but because of sanctions cause the hurts of the Iranian economy, but also Middle East, and then also SCO now is neighbors cause more troubles, and India also very concerned about that.
Talking about India, Professor Nalapat, your thought about that, particularly regarding the U.S. role, and really in that regard, what does SCO aspire to become? Will it become a so-called, what others consider, anti-U.S. alliance?
Well, I don't, I'd like to say that the U.S. and the other NATO countries are basically engaged. They are supporting, if I may say so, the anti-Shia forces throughout the Middle East and in fact throughout the globe. Wherever you have the Shia, we are talking about Yemen, we are talking about Iran, we are talking about Lebanon. There is, frankly, NATO is very hostile to the Shia, and the attitude to Iran is part of that. As far as India is concerned, we have built this with the help of our Iranian friends, and with partnership, we have built the Chabahar port, which is a very important transport artery to Central Asia, and we are going ahead with buying Iranian oil, and we would like to trade completely with Iran. I would personally feel, and I think almost every Indian policy analyst will agree, Iran should be a member of the SCO, a full member of the SCO at the earliest. The fact of the matter is that no country can have a veto over the choices of other countries, and that is becoming a fact. But 30 years ago, the United States was a far more dominant position than it has today. 30 years ago, if you compare the Chinese economy with that of the United States, the Chinese economy could not even be compared with Japan. And today, China is about 75% of the U.S. economy and is likely to overtake the U.S. economy in a relatively short time. So the world is changing. And as far as we are concerned, I'd like to repeat that for us, America is a very good friend. We have about 4 million Indians or Indian Americans there, and we have got the best of relations with President Trump. And I must say, to his credit, that we have not had much of a problem, despite the fact that we are very close to Russia, we are very, very close to Iran, and we are trying very hard to establish a similar relationship with China.
Mr. Sloboda, before we go, your thought as well. The SCO leaders meeting is happening at a time that you will see shuttling diplomacy about the geopolitics taking place later this year. You will have the G20, you will have the APEC, you will have several other platforms that are supposed to work for discussion. So eventually, this year's SCO meeting, what does it mean leading up to all the later in-depth and possible heated debate globally about where to go and which road to take? Mr. Sloboda.
Yeah, I think our Indian partners are so balanced that to a fault, that partners do not dictate to your foreign policy with your other partners with sanctions and threats. Maybe patience is taken a little bit too far there. Not only are there a number of the usual international talking shops scheduled for this year, but a far more important geopolitical test will come when the U.S.'s renewed round of oil sanctions take effect in November, in the upcoming month. And I think more than all of the international meetings combined, the first real crisis point that the Shanghai Cooperation Organization will face, the new Shanghai Cooperation Organization with India and Pakistan as full members, it will be stress tested over Iran. Iran has the position in the SCO of observer member and an applicant for full membership. It is the second to highest tier of membership in the SCO. And the Trump administration and its allies, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and dragging most likely the EU kicking and screaming behind is hell-bent on conflict with Iran. Right now, the economic war is in full swing. The proxy and covert war is in its initial stages, and it will eventually escalate, I believe, to military strikes and an attempt at some form of Libya-style regime change in Iran. And how the SCO responds as an organization to that and represents Eurasian solidarity and unity and defense among its members will be crucial in the next 2 years, I believe.
Your thoughts, Professor Wang, before we go.
Well, SCO is a symbol of the new type of international relations. I think in the 21st century. So Iranian issue definitely is a test. United States, the unilateral sanctions to Iran definitely violated the international consensus in the United Nations resolutions.
Very interesting. People are looking forward to what might be the discussion result of this SCO meeting. For now, thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. Wang Yiwei, Mark Sloboda, and Madhav Nalapat. Really appreciate it. Thank you.